Right. Okay. D&D podcast. I'm reshooting this 3 minutes into it because it just happened. We messed up. Like I was saying, we do have a guest today. We have my friend Nadiel.
Yes, sir.
Right. Nadiel is here. I did tell you guys about Nadiel in the last episode. I may not have named him, but I did say we are gonna have a guest. Didi is also here, but she's not here. She's in the what you want to call the audience position. She may go to the bedroom because she's like popped like a bubble. Mm-hmm. She's about to give birth. It can happen during this podcast, right? But and if it does, we'll still post whatever we could.
Just keep the whole thing rolling.
All right, so y'all, I'm kind of excited about this episode. Not kind of, but I am. Just because it has to do with topics that I really like to study and involve myself in. And Nadiel is one of those people that I met in high school. Now, quick backstory real quick. First of all, introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Nadiel. I'm 24. I went to high school with David.
That was such a
we went the same year though.
Yeah. I think maybe, I don't know. I was in whatever grade. I'm going to bleep his name out. I was in whatever grade he was in.
Yeah, so you were like 2 grades ahead of me.
Okay, yeah.
So I was a freshman, you were a junior, I think.
Yeah, because I moved here halfway through my sophomore year and didn't have any friends. Junior year is really when I met friends.
You graduated what, 2016?
2016, yeah.
Yeah, I did 2018.
Yeah. But I will say this. I do remember this one specific instance, right? Like, we didn't really like become friends in high school, by the way. I'm not saying this is we knew each other, we knew about each other, and that was basically really it. But I will say there's this one instance, right, where I was with me, right? And we were in this room. I can't remember what it was, but I think they were like giving out food or something like that.
At school?
Yeah, at school. And you walked up to me and you said, "Hey, what's up?" But you were like 4'5".
Yeah,
like you were super short.
Yeah,
right?
High school was not good.
And your haircut was different, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the bowl cut or if it was a different cut.
It was a different cut.
Yeah, but it was definitely like, and you had a really, really, really light voice. Right.
Yeah.
And I remember
high school was not kind to me, man.
No, I not kind to him, right? Listen, if I looked at myself in high school, I see my mustache and I had like a pencil drawing here that I used to do, and it was not good. Right. And I had like whatever this was, it was like 3 hairs that I really used to flex. But I will say that at the time, I was very I just wasn't like, I don't want to say I wasn't a good person, but I was definitely like just too distracted, right?
Yeah.
And I had too many things that I was prioritizing that really weren't priorities. So I remember when you introduced, I was like, who is this kid?
Yeah.
Right. And I felt bad afterwards, but I don't even think you felt that because I didn't say anything.
I don't even remember this day.
This literally happened. I didn't say a word to you.
Wow.
I didn't say a word to you. So
now look at us.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, guys. So but I do remember one thing. This is what made me remember you. When we would have our prayer services like in the morning. Yeah, you remember I think it was on Wednesdays in the morning, right? I went to a couple of them and I remember you being in there. I do remember that.
I led it my senior year of high school, which you were already out, but when you were in schoul, it was my friend Danny leading it, and I was one of the helpers for it.
And I remember Danny. Like the thing is, like how do I explain it? I think Danny's a good guy, right? I do.
Love him, man.
And I remember in high school I was immature, so I did have like something against him just because it had to do with something that's super immature, right? Super immature, right? But now that we're older, I do see him like online and stuff like that. And I see what he's doing. Yeah, he's doing great.
Yeah, he's probably my best friend. I call him all the time.
Yeah, I will say like the way he led the reflections was really, really
for sure.
But anyways, so yeah, so the reason why I have Nadiel on, guys, is because Nadiel actually wrote a book, right? If you don't know what it's about the book of Colossians. I think the title of it is a guide to the book of Colossians, correct, right?
Yeah. It's either a guide 2 or a guide 4.
Yeah.
I wrote it and I forgot, but it's right? That, yeah.
But it is free, right? You can actually go to his Instagram or wherever he's posted it on. I think it's what's the link called?
The link
Gumroad, right? It's like Gumroad link, right? Mm-hmm. And you guys can download it for free. It's a file. It's like a PDF file, very large. I think it's like 80 something pages. If I remember, I think it's
86.
One of the two around there. And it's a very informative. Well, actually, let me let Nadiel explain it.
Yeah. I mean, should I go like the whole way? Should I go like the whole explain everything, how it started?
I would say, what inspired you first?
Oh God. Honestly, it was the weirdest thing ever. It was a few days before my birthday, January 3rd. I had taken off that whole week off of work because I was actually planning, like, my original plan was to go snowboarding. My original plan was to go snowboarding for my birthday in, like, Tennessee.
Yeah.
But then, yeah. Oh, no way. Oh, yeah, we talked about it. But, and then I didn't do that. And I was like, what am I going to do that whole week that I'm off? And then like a few days beforehand, I was like, I've always wanted to, like, write something related to the Bible. I knew that it was something that I wanted to do since I was like 16, 17. Yeah. I just never really did it or knew how to do it. And then early on in 2023, I was reading the book of Malachi. And then Malachi is the last book of the Old Testament. And I remember I was so riveted by it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to actually write something on Malachi, just like a commentary on it, a little bit of a book on it. And then I started it at a coffee shop, and then I never completed it. And then end of 2024, I kind of just like, let me try it again. And then I was thinking, what book could I do it? What book could I do it on? My two favorite books of the Bible are John and Hebrews. But the thing with both of them is that they're very, very lengthy, and they're super heavy. I love Hebrews. Too heavy for me to like 24 to like really like jump into it. So I was thinking, like, what's a good happy medium? And then I remember I really love the book of Colossians, which is only 4 chapters, really easy. And then, literally, like, the day after my birthday, January 3rd, I went to a coffee shop and I was like, let me just start it and see what happens. And then I went to a Starbucks January 4th at like 10 a.m. And I remember I sat there with a PDF, or just like an open document with that title, A Guide for the Book of Colossians. And I was just looking at it. I was doing all my research. And then I stopped looking at the computer, and then I looked up. Just like into nothing, and I was like, "Wow, I'm really gonna like commit to this right now."
I
had a moment where I was like, either I do it or I don't.
You had a SpongeBob moment. Literally, he's writing and he's like that, like the paper in front of him, and it's just one really nice.
Literally, that's exactly what it was. I looked up, I was like, "Am I really gonna commit to doing this?" Because I knew that if I was gonna do it, I was gonna have to go all in. And I wanted it to be like a lengthy thing. And then I was like, either I do it or I don't. And then I was like, let me just see how far I get. And then that first day I wrote like 10 pages, and then I started writing ever since then, little by little. I would really take up my weekends writing, which was heavy on me because I didn't really go out. I just spent my time writing. And then, literally, little by little, it just came into formation.
Nice.
I sent it off to a few leaders. They gave me a lot of feedback on it. Originally, it was going to be like 50 pages, and then with more feedback that I got, it just kept on growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, because you always want to like elaborate and make sure that you're being very clear with what you're explaining, or how the book of Colossians is even supposed to be meant to be interpreted.
Sure, I mean it was that, but it was also my leaders were like, I don't hear you. Like they're they're like, Nadia, you like telling stories, you like, I don't know, being yourself, and all that it was at the very beginning of it was just like a commentary, like a really just informative commentary.
Let's get into that. So you're saying you like being yourself. There's definitely yourself in there, bro. Because
thank you.
Like, first of all, I'm a geek at heart, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I never got into, right, was Star Wars. But you do get into Star Wars at some point.
My favorite series.
And I was trying to figure out, how are you able to explain your explanation of how Star Wars coincides with the Book of Colossians.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
Crazy, right?
What a great question, right? So I originally wrote all of it. I wrote the entire guide, and then I was thinking, this is missing something. And then I felt like it was missing like an intro. And when I sat down with my pastor, his name is Pastor Justin. I love him. He's like my mentor. He even told me that like you have to kind of put yourself in it, be funny, be yourself. And then I was thinking about like the intro. How can I make this sound like, because my aim with writing it was I wanted it to be both understandable for beginners, branded to the Bible, but I also wanted it to be really informative to seasoned Christians who knew theology, which is a really hard like thing to grasp because you really have to fill in that gap. And so I was like, I don't know, just movies. And then so I thought about Star Wars. Movies. I've been watching Star Wars since I was like 5, dude. I loved it so much. Played with all the toys. Had all the Lego sets. Yeah. I was one of those kids.
I was more a Bionicle guy.
Nice. I can never get into that one. It was always a Lego Star Wars.
Instantly, but go ahead.
And then I just thought about it, like Star Wars, because I'm a sucker for context. Like, why did this happen? What caused it to happen? And Star Wars, all the movies start off with the opening crawl.
Yeah.
Episode 4, it starts off with like, it just like in 3 paragraphs, it explains to you the whole Star Wars universe. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's great. And then I thought about it. I was like, what I'm trying to do with this guide is just give the context, specifically the intro of it, which is just talking about why Colossians, the history of Colossians, the church of Colossians. I was like, let me just do what Star Wars did and just explain everything in detail.
So in your mind, there was a Star Wars like scroll, like a summary that came up.
Yeah, Before you get into the actual content, which were the 4 chapters, chapters 1 through 4 of the book of Colossians. And then, so I just thought about it. I was like, this is great. And then I thought of like the connection of it. My favorite movie of all time is Empire Strikes Back, which is the 5th Star Wars movie. or the second one technically that came out. And then if you didn't understand what I said in the guide, if I remember correctly, is that if you didn't understand the context of episode 5, like the film preceding it, A New Hope, episode 4, you would be so completely lost with why the Empire is going to like an Arctic planet Hoth. Why Luke is trying to run away. Like why you would be so confused as to all of it.
Yeah, because from my understanding, Star Wars is not written like the movies, at least like the Lucasfilm, they're at least not canonically like written, right?
Yeah,
they're like jumping around, right?
Yeah.
So that's why like I would watch some with my brother. I'm like, yo, I'm so confused, and I would have a friend explain it to me. I'm like, man, I wish I had your passion and love for this, like I did, like this, bro. Because I have that same passion, but for different things, obviously, right? Like for me, I think I was really big on what's that series of movies like Marvel? Like Marvel, I'm a super Marvel head.
Yeah.
So that for me,
Star Wars now is really bad. I feel like Star Wars now has lost its
I
identity.
think the last one I watched was Rogue One, right? It was Rogue One with my brother.
Wow, that's 2016.
Or maybe it was The Force Awakens.
That's 2015.
And I had just got like,
wow.
I think it was The Force Awakens.
You don't have to watch any. It's fine. They really lost their identity.
It's like, I don't want to give bad credit to them. Lucasfilm.
They've lost their identity, man. They really have. There's a new show that came out called The Acolyte.
Yeah, The Acolyte.
It's so bland and it's just bad.
And we watched The Mandalorian. We watched
good.
Mandalorian's
pretty good. I feel like that's one of the good series.
She really likes Grogu, like Baby Yoda, right? She really likes Grogu, right? We have like a Grogu popcorn maker, right?
They were smart with that one. Make a cute Yoda. Yeah. Anyway, so Star Wars, the way that it has all of its context and it just explains it all, I was like, let me just do that. Yeah. And then it made sense. I mean, a lot of people have said like what you said, that like it kind of clicked for them when like I kind of put it in that way. Yeah. Which is good.
No, yeah, because a lot of people, like for me at least, I'm very like I like to be illustrative, right? Yeah. And when you paint a picture for me, it explains things a lot better for me, right? But now I'm at a point, right, where I had to like, there's certain things that I really, really want to learn, and not everybody does that, right? So sometimes you have to listen. It's like listening to a college session or somebody in particular that teaches a certain way, but you feel like they have the most well-versed understanding of something, right? To clarify it for you. So now I've flexed my brain or exercised my brain to be able to like understand those things.
Yeah, right? Man, I love listening to people that I don't understand. Yeah. Like that, I think that's one of the things that helped me learn a lot. Is I would listen to debates, different religions and stuff like that, and like I wouldn't understand it, but then I would just rewatch it, and that's sort of like my learning process.
Yeah. Is rewatching. Like there's certain people that I watch that I would have to like go back and listen to, and it is true. Like a lot of the stuff that I listen to is just because I respect it a lot. It's just their way of understanding and studying the word, which is, it comes from a lot of like Baptist backgrounds, right? But it also there's also different backgrounds as well, but for the most part, I respect, like for example, there's an older gentleman, he passed away already. His name is R.C. Sproul. I don't know.
Of course, love that man.
He's like, when I first heard him, I had to.
My pastor saw him die.
Really? Oh wow, that's morbid.
Crazy.
Yeah, like how do you want to?
He had a heart attack.
Yeah, but like
my pastor saw it, like when it happened.
Really?
Isn't that crazy?
That's like
apparently he said that. Well, I don't know if that was the one, but he saw him have like an attack in like a hotel.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And he was surrounded by his guys and whatnot, but like apparently he collapsed and like just saw it happen.
Wow, that's
what a crazy connection right there. I'm sorry,
crazy.
I completely
that went like this. I was gonna say his the way he teaches things is very like he's very like the book is here,
reformed.
So but the way that he explains things is very informative, right? And so
I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah. So for me, I had to kind of like go back and watch a lot of his videos, like, and click, like reverse, listen to that one more time, reverse, listen to that one more time. And then like, actually, just search things up. But yeah, I like to like learn from the most part from different aspects of how, like from different denominations. You did tell me earlier, you're like, you're studying different denominations right now. Which I think is awesome, by the way. Just learning how to like, how everybody looks at things, right? From their viewpoints.
Really helped.
Yeah.
A lot.
And like the thing is, it's like for me at least, I came from like a super Pentecostal background, right? And so for me, it was just like, I feel like a lot of what I learned was very like, they were very passionate. That's the word I like to use, is passionate, right? Yeah. Because I don't like to discredit anybody. But it was very passionate. And so when I stopped, right, when we moved, we started learning from a different aspect, and it was just like, wow, it's really crazy how you can learn from everybody, right? Yeah. But that's a whole nother topic conversation.
No, for real, man.
You talk about your concern for how in this day and age the that it is now a lot more of a how do I put it, that nowadays people tend to pursue the pursuit of happiness a lot more, right? And it's not necessarily an evil thing, right? But you did say that by allowing ourselves to try to find happiness, we it's better for us to try and find God, because God is, at the end of the day, is our happiness. And could you kind of go into detail about that?
Yeah, that's chapter 2, if I remember correctly. Because in chapter 2, what Paul does when he writes to the Colossians, he's kind of trying to like fix their thinking, because many of them are really caught up on the new thing. Like there's a new age. Paul calls it like vain philosophy. And they were really kind of caught up on like, yeah, we have Jesus Christ, but what about this? Like, let's keep learning about this. And it's a heavily, it's a Greek influenced culture, and a notable thing from Greek in the first century was
heavy now still.
Yeah, for sure. A notable thing for the Greeks in the first century was like this just higher pursuit of knowledge, constantly trying to pursue knowledge. And so Paul was trying to say that like, you've already found your treasure in Jesus Christ. Why are you still trying to find all of these things through vain philosophies? And many of those philosophies that they would follow, actually, Paul writes about it, that it would actually lead them to the worship of angels and these spiritual beings, which obviously is anti-Christian. And they would also they had philosophy on one end, but on the other end, many of them were trying to go back to Judaism. And Paul was saying, you guys are trying to go back under the law that Jesus Christ has set you free from. And he's basically, the whole premise of it is that Jesus Christ is more than enough. Chapter 1, he's talking about the supremacy of Jesus Christ, the one who, in Colossians 1:17, he says that Christ is the one who, through whom all things are created, and all things are created for him. And then in chapter 2, he's trying to like make it real practical for them, saying, you don't have to do anything else. If Christ is everything, just submit to his rule. And basically the whole premise of what he's saying is that if Christ is your master, nothing else is your master. You don't have to submit to any other false religions, any other laws, because Christ Jesus is the one that you serve. And so I kind of just thought about it in our day and age. It's just interesting. I think what really kind of identifies our day and age is the pursuit of spiritualism, and not having any religion tied into it. I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase that it's a relationship, not a religion.
Yeah, it's a relationship.
I hate that phrase. I really do hate that phrase. I used to agree to it. I used to espouse to it, just because it sounded so sweet. But then I kind of thought about it. It makes religion sound like it's a horrible thing. Which obviously religion has really negative drawbacks to it in some cases, but good and proper religion, James talks about it in his book, or in his epistle. He talks about how it's caring for others. And whenever we do say something like it's religion, it's relationship over religion, I do get the heart of it, but I think it's
like there's a good intention coming from it.
For sure. And religion isn't inherently a bad thing. Like whenever Christians say that they're not religious, I do understand what they're trying to say in the sense that, yeah, we're not legalistic, but you are religious. Let's call it for what it is. Christianity is a religion. And what you see nowadays with progressive Christianity is it's trying to do away with tradition. It's trying to do away with orthodox teaching for the sake of either tolerance, for the sake of trying to just be more appealing to the world, and for the sake of just trying to be more free. But in reality, in the pursuit of that freedom, it's just being more and more binding upon them, and they're worshiping something else that isn't Jesus Christ. A few days ago, I was having a conversation. I posted a video on Catholicism on my Instagram and why there's a divide between Catholicism and Protestantism. And then I had a guy comment, and he said that, I can't believe you would say this about Catholics. Catholics are heretical. They don't love Jesus Christ, all this stuff. And then he was saying they more so listen to their church fathers or anything. Like they always look back to their church fathers.
Yeah, but that's kind of just putting everybody underneath one umbrella.
For sure.
Because there's definitely Catholics that subscribe to Jesus Christ.
100%.
Because in the beginning, anyways, in the first place, when Catholicism was Catholicism, before the schism, there was a specific understanding of things, right? Up until it got to a point where that's when the church became divided, right? That's when Martin Luther comes in and plays his role, and not only him, but that's kind of what caused the division of these other denominations in the first place. Man.
So his whole argument when he was commenting was that they always listen to their church fathers. Catholics always, and then I responded back, I hope you know we have the same church fathers as Catholics. We listen to this, like our theology is based off of the scriptures, yes, but it's also been formulated and shaped and kind of given a definition to it because of what the early church fathers
that's where it started from.
Yes, 100%. And so nowadays, what breaks my heart is that there are a lot of Christians who they try to pursue a relationship with Christ, but they either hate his church or they are trying to be like more individualistic,
They subscribe to certain
independent.
things, and then there's certain things that just because it doesn't align with how society deems things to be, they kind of just separate themselves from certain things, which is it's either you're in or you're not.
For
Period.
sure. Yes,
That's
yes.
being lukewarm in the general.
Yeah, for sure. And then, so how I tied it into Colossians is that, well, Paul is talking about ascribing to Jesus Christ. He's telling the church to not leave being the church. I feel like that's the same call for us today.
Yeah.
We subscribe to Jesus Christ. We love Jesus Christ. We don't submit to anything else. And we also love his church. Like, it's not a separate thing. And I think the pursuit of my well-being, my happiness, while I think it's a great pursuit, at the end of the day, it can sometimes be an idol. I was watching a speech by, I can't say his name. His name was like Alexander Solzhenitsyn or something like that.
Whoa.
He gave it. He was a Russian. He gave the speech at Harvard in the year 1978, I think, and he was actually sent to the Gulag for 8 years because he wrote something. He wrote a letter criticizing Joseph Stalin, and so he was sent to the Gulag for 8 years, and then he got out of the Gulag. He got kicked out of the Soviet Union, and then he started living out in the West. And then he gave a speech at Harvard, and he was comparing the two. He was comparing the Soviet Union, and he was comparing the West.
Yeah.
Back then in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the West was really kind of like the ideal model for living.
Yeah.
Just capitalism and all these other
American
things.
dream.
Yeah. And so he's writing from someone who experienced the worst of the East with the Soviet Union. And then coming out to the West, he was saying that the idol of the West is pursuing well-being.
Yeah.
This guy's not a Christian, by the way, but he did I actually don't know if he was a Christian, but he did say that that it's good to submit to a higher being because it helps us with morality. But he was basically saying that the idol of the West is trying to pursue our own well-being, trying to pursue materialistic gain. And he was saying this in the 70s.
Yeah.
He was saying it's going to be to our detriment if we continue to do this stuff. And I mean, look at us now in 2024.
Yeah.
It's all about, what about me?
Yeah.
The church hurt me. And I do think church hurt is a valid thing. But I feel like sometimes it's not as valid as we think it is. Matt Chandler, another great Reformed preacher. I do like him a lot. He said that the disciples didn't stop following Jesus because Judas betrayed him, because they were hurt by Judas. They followed Jesus because it was Jesus.
Yeah.
And in the same way, we shouldn't stop following Christ. We shouldn't stop following his church just because we're hurt by what someone else did. Obviously, church hurt is a valid thing.
Yeah.
It's something that doesn't need to be talked about, but I don't think it's ever sufficient enough for you to segregate yourself from the body of Christ.
Yeah.
I view it as separating yourself from the body of Christ is as it can be equated to separating yourself from Christ entirely.
Yeah.
We can get
Because
into
the Bible calls us to come into community, to come into and to be the church. I mean, necessarily it was funny. Not until maybe about like 2 or 3 years ago, right, when I was really, because I'm gonna be honest with you, obviously everybody kind of knows already, but for the most part, I didn't take my relationship with God seriously up until about maybe, I say probably when I met Didi, right around there, right. She really motivated me a lot, and not in the sense of like where she forced herself upon like whatever my thought process was. It was just the way her reflection was, how she treated me, and how she chose to extend grace to me in my life when we were in our dating phase. Yeah. I saw a lot of reflection of what Christ has done to her in her life, right? Man. And so I was just like, wow, man, like I'm unworthy of this person. So I was always afraid to step forward and make this relationship much more serious than what it was at the time, just due to the fact of my own iniquities and imperfections, right?
For sure, man.
But what I will say is,
so sweet.
She's awesome. But what I will say is, about 2 or 3 years ago, right, that's when I realized, like, it always made sense. Like, it never made sense to me at first, like when we were talking about the church, at least, right? And then I realized, like, the church is obviously when I looked up the definition, I think the word is ecclesio. I think that's the word, right? Yeah. Ecclesia, and it's actually the people, right? It's the people that are the church. The building is just the building at the end of the day, right? We're the church, and that's what Christ calls us to do. Without that, if the Bible clearly is stating it, obviously we should probably try and do it, because it's probably the right way to go about things, right?
I would say a lot of it has to do, and this goes into the denomination thing. A lot of it has to do with how you and I both grew up Pentecostal. Pentecostal / non-denominational. I grew up Catholic for a little bit, but that was...
Yeah, my father was Catholic. He came from a Catholic background. That was
because I was from Puerto Rico, and most of the churches where I was from were just Catholic. So
he was too.
Yeah. So whenever we moved out here to Florida, we kind of found a Pentecostal church, and we ascribed to it, stuck to it. But in terms of denomination, something that I've been learning that's so interesting is that denominations like non-denominationalism, Pentecostalism, even Baptists have a low church view, which just means that we only view the church as it's just us. It's just the gathering of the saints. Whereas if you look at other denominations, like the two biggest ones that we could think of that aren't like us, Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, they have something called the high church view.
Yeah.
So they view church as like the most holy and sacred thing. That's why whenever you go into one of their church buildings, it's one of the most, a lot of times it's the most beautiful buildings. It's the highest, the tallest ceilings.
I love their glass art.
Dude,
their glass art is beautiful.
Yeah, they have the glass art. They have paintings of church fathers all throughout their buildings because they have a high church view. That's whenever you like think of Catholics, like why do they worship the saints? It's not that they worship the saints. They call it veneration of the saints. And it's because they believe that even whenever you die, you're still a part of the church, even in eternity. Yeah. So whenever they say that like looking for Saint Peter, for example, for prayer, it's basically in the same, they view it in the same way. Again, I'm not perfect at this, but they view it in the same way as like me asking you to pray for me. Yeah. They view it in that sense. But they have a high church view. So they view church as like so completely different from what you and I are accustomed to. Anglicans are the same. They're a little bit more in the middle. It's just so interesting that like how you and I are developed. To us, the church is just like, oh, you know, it's just a place that you go to every week. But to them, it's like the biggest and most important thing. And I do think that has its good things because what non-denominationalism, what Pentecostalism, what you and I grew up in, it really has a hyper focus on personal conviction. Yeah. Make sure your relationship with Christ is right. Yeah. Which is a really good thing.
Because it all starts with you at first, right?
Sure,
you know, 100%. And obviously as you grow, then that's when you start realizing, yo, this is really important as well. Most things are important that the Bible tells us to do in the first place. Man. But when it comes to like, I will say this: right now we pertain to a non-denominational church, right? Which to me, it's funny. It's like it's contradictory because a non-denominational church is kind of a denomination.
It is its own denomination,
right? So
yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, non-denominational churches are. I'm a part of one too. I love it so much, but it technically is. I get the heart of it. Like, we're not ascribed to anything, but at the end of the day, it becomes its own denomination. There are a trillion of non-denominational churches now, man. They all are very similar in a certain kind of way, but. Some guy calls it non-denominational churches are just Baptist churches without calling themselves Baptist because they have a hyper focus on personal conviction, hyper focus on reading the scriptures. But yeah, like if you go to an Eastern Orthodox or a Catholic church, for them it's like church is everything. You're out of the church, okay, you're out of Christ. Like to them, that's what it is.
Yeah. So you did talk about at some point, you did introduce in your book the Marcionism, right?
Marcionism. Yeah.
So can you elaborate a little bit on that for those that don't know?
Yeah, Marcion was a Marcion, I think it is, and then his like sect is called Marcionism based off of his name.
His name was Pont.
I guess so. Yeah, right? All I knew was his last name, but when I was writing it, basically Marcionism was like an early church heresy. There were so many false heresies going on at the time, just after the apostles were dying, and Marcion was one of those heretics in a way, and he taught in something so unique. He said that. The God of the Old Testament is different from the God of the New Testament, the Father of Jesus.
He believed there's two different versions of God.
Yeah, he taught that the God of the Old Testament was ruthless and mean, and he's cold-hearted, and he's looking to unleash his wrath, whereas the God of the New Testament, which is the Father of Jesus Christ, I don't think he ascribed Jesus Christ to deity. I could be wrong, but he only saw the Father as a deity. He taught that he was a different God who was more merciful, more kind than the God of the Old Testament. Yeah. And so basically what he did is he developed his own biblical canon. I think he was actually one of the first to ever do it, which caused the church to respond in contrast to him, to create the biblical canon that we have today. Marcion taught that the only books that we can ascribe to are some of Paul's letters. I think he only had like 10 of Paul's letters. And even at that, at just certain points of Paul's letters, and the Gospel of Luke, but it was a heavily edited rendition of Luke's Gospel. And then he ascribed, obviously, to none of the Old Testament. And he said, that's our sacred scripture. And then so basically... It sounds
like he was distasteful, like he had a distastefulness for the Old Testament.
And for Jews. Yeah. He hated the Jews. Like 100%. He really hated the Jews.
Anti-Semitism is something that leads forever, right?
Fortunately, man. But yeah, so he taught that. And then the church heard him and they were like, he's horribly wrong. Yeah. And because obviously, other than Marcion and his sect of people, which wasn't a lot, but they did have a loud voice, the church was like, that's actually not the case. We actually believe in the authenticity of Mark's gospel, Matthew's, of John's gospel, of all of Paul's writing, all of Peter's. Like they saw the whole of scripture and they were like, Marcion, you're wrong in like what you're saying right now. And so that's sort of like one of the fuels for the biblical canon being made, which is what we have today. And And so basically the whole premise of it was it's a rejection of this idea that there are two separate gods, completely contradictory to the Old Testament in the teaching that there's only one God, and completely contradictory to what the New Testament teaches, that basically all the New Testament is about how the God of the Old Testament is the same God of the New Testament. In fact, it's the same God in bodily form, Jesus Christ, which Paul talks about in Colossians chapter 1. He says that Christ is the image of the invisible God bodily.
Yeah.
I say it in the book, I say that Jesus Christ, if God were the whole ocean, Jesus Christ is God in a bottle, in a physical bottle that we can see. It's all of God in the one man, Jesus Christ. So basically, Marcionism is so interesting. Gnosticism in the early church, there was something called Arianism as well, which the guy who taught it was, he had a slogan, again, based off of his name. He had a slogan that was like, there was a time when the sun was not, or something like that. And he taught that Jesus Christ couldn't have ever been eternal. He was never eternal. He was a created being and all this other stuff. And then that actually prompted the church to gather for the in the Council of Nicaea, to kind of formulate the doctrine. And now we have the Nicene Creed, which is literally a cornerstone of the Christian faith. If you don't agree with the Nicene Creed, then you're not a Christian.
Yeah, but the book of John immediately refutes that, though. The very first verse is literally says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God," and so on and so forth. So, and then even when you go into like verse 14, when I literally just posted a video talking about this in the first place. Like in verse 14, it literally says, "And the Word became flesh." So that's literally talking about Jesus Christ the entire time, right? So
the church was like, "You're wrong." Like, in fact, the guy Saint Nicholas, who we call Santa Claus, slapped him across the face at the council.
Wow, imagine getting ho ho ho.
Isn't that crazy, dude? Yeah, Saint Nicholas, he was so bamboozled by it that he slapped him across the face, which basically is like a symbolic slap to all of Arianism. Arianism, I feel like it's modern day Islam. Islam,
because they deny the divinity of Jesus.
They believe that he's just a prophet, and Arianism kind of taught the same thing. Modern day Islam, Jehovah's Witnesses even are very similar to that, describing that Jesus Christ isn't God.
So for example, like Mormons, when they say that like in Jesus' last days that he came to America, right?
Yeah, really weird, right?
Right. I'm like, it's very particular how he spent his whole time in the East and was like, you know what, let me go over there in the West specifically, right, and talk to Joseph over there.
Yeah, man.
Quick. And then
Mormonism is a very interesting thing.
Yeah, I think I will say this though, for the most part, a lot of these religions, that commonality of having Jesus in there is very important.
Almost all
they don't deny his historical context of him.
All main religions ascribe Jesus Christ something.
Yeah,
I feel like that means a lot. Like even Islam, they say that he's a prophet, that he's a good person. Jews, while they do reject his messiahship, they do recognize that he was a historical person. Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, even Buddhism like ascribes Jesus Christ, but it's only in Christianity where we see him as God. It's really so interesting, right?
Yeah, but it's funny how the one religion, Christianity, is like, no, he is the only one. Stop, like that. This Jesus Christ, he stops. It stops right here. That's it. You guys are all wrong.
Yeah,
I'm here. That's it.
It's so interesting, man.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with someone, and we were talking a little bit about Jesus Christ, and they said that, I didn't know, a Christian. She said, I didn't know that Jesus Christ was God. I always thought that it was separate.
Yeah,
and that's coming from a Christian. Like, that's so, like, it actually kind of, like, it was so interesting to me that there are some Christians out there who, innocently enough, don't understand Christian doctrine.
Yeah.
They just think that Jesus Christ was separate from God. But no, he is God himself.
Yeah.
That's also one of the reasons why I did write the book of the guide to the book of Colossians, was because I just wanted to give, like, an informative description of the Christian faith within the context of a small, short book in the New Testament. Yeah. I've received a lot of good feedback on it, which is sweet.
No, I see. I was happy about it too, by the way. I saw it and I was like, yo, I thought it was so cool too. Like, I was like, yo, this is crazy. Because when you posted the video, I saw that a lot of people, it gave attention to a lot of people.
Yeah, man.
A lot of people were really happy about that book.
Yeah,
but it definitely is like a super informative book, and I think your take is really good. Thanks, so man. I do recommend you guys, please hit the link in my, because I'm gonna try to see if I can copy the link in your bio and put it in the description as well.
That'd be so sweet, man.
And then also obviously I'll leave his social medias as well.
Totally free, by the way.
Yeah. So unless you want to donate.
Yeah,
you give it to me and then I'll give it to him.
Just kidding. Dude, I had someone, because I posted it on TikTok too. I had someone donate $100.
Really?
Yeah, I texted them immediately. I didn't know them.
You're like,
but
take this back.
I DM'd them. I was like, "Are you sure? Like, this is a lot." I was like, "This is crazy." But yeah, it's totally free.
That's awesome. So you were saying, I will say this because I'm gonna jump back real quick. You were saying
sure.
earlier in your earlier years at your previous church that you actually gave a lesson on the Book of Colossians in the first place, right? Is that kind of like what where your Book of Colossians kind of
Yeah.
like piqued your interest?
Yeah, it was at our the church that I was a part of. I think I was 19 at the time,
Mhm.
which was 5 years ago. We did after Sunday service. I was leading like a high school youth group.
Mhm.
We had our main youth group, which was with youth and young adults.
Yeah.
But then my pastor at the time said that he wanted to do like just a high school thing,
Mhm.
and so he he asked me to like gather leaders and like prepare to do all that whole entire thing, and then I gathered like 8 to 10 leaders, and I really wanted to develop them so that they could know the scriptures. And then after Sunday service one day, we went to my house, all of us, and then I was like, I had just read the book of Colossians for myself like a few times, and I was so like marveled by it, in awe of it, just how cool it is. And then I was
Me, it's
like,
the
I
Book
gotta
of
share
Romans,
this.
bro. I know everybody knows Romans,
no,
right?
but
here,
Romans
but
is a
like
beast
that's
of
the
its
book
own.
that I was like, whoa.
Yeah, man. So I was like, I went home with all of them. They were all like, I was 19 at the time. They were all like, it was a mixture of men and women. They were all like just high schoolers.
Yeah.
And then so we went to my house and we read all of Colossians together. And I was just giving commentary to it as I was teaching on it. I was probably wrong on some of the stuff that I was saying. I probably didn't even understand much of the stuff that I was saying. But at that moment, I was like, man, this is good. Like, I love this book so much.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the time that really kind of grew my love for it. Seeing them be fascinated by it, and then even me in turn being fascinated by it, I was like, that was it. Like, that was one of the, maybe I didn't know it at the time, but that was one of the things that fueled me to like, this is a good book to write something about.
For me, I remember one time my brother, he was like, "Yo, I know we referenced the prayer that Jesus, um, to kind of show the disciples how to pray, right?"
Yeah.
And I remember he sat there. He's like, "Really read this like verse, read it, really like read what he's saying." And you realize, like, obviously, when he says that we're not of this world, right? Obviously, when you go back, you really realize that he's talking about a system, like the system that we're in, because sometimes I think it's funny that a lot of people that try to, they give their exegesis on whatever when it comes to that particular verse. They always,
Matthew 6.
yeah, I think it's actually might be in John. With John, I think he refers to it in John as well.
The Lord's Prayer?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I may be wrong. I don't want to misquote it. I'll put it up. Like I said, remember, I'm Google, and I have 16 tabs open all the time. So, but when he was referring to our system, right? Instead of realizing, I'm like I was saying, the exegesis that a lot of these people give is almost like as if we're alien like, and it's like no, we're very much created to be here on Earth. It's just obviously our purpose has been altered due to to previous things that have occurred,
100%.
right? So for us, it's just like, no, it's telling us, like, obviously it's not telling us to not obey the law. We're supposed to be a law-abiding citizens, period. But obviously, if it disgraces God in the first place,
for sure. Romans teaches that. Romans 13, submit to godly authority. Submit to all authority.
So we're called, to be law-abiding citizens in the first place, right? So, and a lot of people don't like that. Right?
Yeah, man.
And I think that's like part of the society that we live in today, right? Where we live in a society. Well, that sounds crazy. I sound like Heath Ledger in Joker, right?
yeah.
But
that's a good actor.
But yeah, great actor. I loved him. But yeah. So we live in a day and age now where the standard of being a quote unquote good person is being accepting of other person's beliefs, right? And that's kind of what a lot of the beginning of like people that study or become saved, right?
Yeah.
They get this understanding, and not all of them do, right? I don't want to stereotype everybody into that aspect, but we kind of get this idea of, yes, we're saved, but this allows us to be free, right?
Yeah.
And that's the complete opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to deny our flesh in the first place.
We have boundaries.
And the idea of having, like, for example, the way that I said this, I think I don't know if I did say it on a podcast or not, but I said this to Didi. I said I wouldn't be at, and I know it's a common thing, but I want us to look in a little deeper on this. I wouldn't be at where I am in my life had it not been for God having his hand in my life.
For sure.
Right? What I mean by that is, yes, I'm left to my own decisions to make, right? We are all, we that, because the whole idea of free will, but the idea is the instructions we're given to by us reading and studying the Bible. There's an instruction on how to do it, right?
Yeah.
How to live your life, to honor God, right? And yes, although I've come this far in my life, but God has instructed me throughout my life, right? I've been in constant denial when I was
Yeah.
younger, right? Or when I wasn't taking my relationship with God the correct way. Um, by denying him and what I needed to do in my life in order to receive the grace that I was given, right? And even when I wasn't living my life, I still extended grace. There's so many times where I could have lost my life,
Yeah.
literally. The most recent one was literally like I was like 18, 19. I don't know if you know this, but I flipped my car when I was around that age. I was going like 70 miles an hour and it like flipped like a lot. I lost control.
Did you get like hurt?
I have like a minor scar right here, but
Dang,
I walked
dude.
out of it. I walked
That's
out of it. If I
crazy.
show you a picture, I'll probably put it up, but it's the car was
Crazy,
smashed. Like,
dude. Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So that was one
It's
of
a
those
grace of
situations
God,
where I was
my
like, yeah,
goodness.
where I was like, God showed me grace for my ignorance, right?
Yeah.
Because that accident happened because of me, right?
Yeah.
And for the
Wow.
longest, I lived my life telling him it was the other person's fault.
Yeah.
Right? But it was legit my fault that caused that
Oh
accident.
my gosh.
My
man.
ignorance and immaturity. Road rage is not something we should subscribe to whatsoever,
No,
right?
man.
Okay, so
It ain't in the Bible.
no, it's not. And if it was, it said, "Thou shalt not road rage."
Yeah, that's not road rage with your horses or
Right?
donkeys.
But yeah, but it does say to not. I can't remember the verse, but it does say to not be quick to anger and slow to speak. And
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that just goes to what I'm trying to get to is just basically that without submitting ourselves to something higher, right? It's specifically God, right?
Yeah.
We kind of lose control of our lives.
Yes.
There's a lot of
100%.
discipline that the Bible requires us to have, right?
Mhm.
But it does so in a gracious way, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And for me, it has been something that's changed my life.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, I think this is of detriment, but the narrative nowadays is really this idea, and it's so dangerous because it's a twisting of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays the narrative is God is love, so you have to be tolerant, you have to love everyone, you can't judge people and stuff like that. And while that is true, God is love, it's what First John teaches, it really is twisting the truth because they equate love to tolerance.
Yeah.
But the book of Romans says something, I think it's in Romans 13, it says that love must cling to what is good and hate what is evil.
Mm-hmm.
So even godly love has a hatred. But it's not the kind of hatred of this world. Godly love has a kind of hatred, and that kind of hatred is toward what is sinful, what is evil. I was having a conversation with my brother, I think last year. We were just talking. Me and my brothers are awesome. I'm the youngest of all three of us, so I'm
John
still
17, by the way.
John 17.
Yeah,
so,
that's
the Lord,
the
Lord praying.
Brothers.
Yeah,
All right, that was so stuck in my head. I was like, I need to make sure I got this correct.
Yeah, I was last. My brother lives in California, and they're both brilliant. Both of my brothers, they're older than me. I'm the youngest in my family, so I'm the runt.
Same.
Yeah, I'm
You're
the
not the
runt.
runt, bro, because you're definitely much taller than me than compared to high school.
Oh yeah,
Right,
of course. Yeah, I'm taller. I'm taller than my middle one. But anyway, my brother lives in California, and we were just out. And last week we were having a conversation at his dinner table. And my brother's brilliant, dude. He is so smart. He's similar to me in the sense that he's stubborn toward what he believes in, and so am I, if I'm being honest. But we were having a conversation about Christianity and just church history and all that stuff. And
that comes with like I don't know if is zeal like considered a good word for that, or is
that probably is the better word.
I think
that probably is the better word. Maybe I shouldn't
with,
say stubbornness.
Yeah, like I think we have just like a zeal for it. Right?
Yes,
because I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
Zeal for what we believe in. And so me and my brother were having a conversation, and I kind of left with the conclusion that just how the world defines kindness, it oftentimes defines kindness as tolerance. And typically it's like tolerance for whatever a person is and whoever a person is. But I don't think the scriptures define kindness in that sense. Because if it's always at the sacrifice of what is true and what is godly, then that's sin at the end of the day. And so
evil.
Yeah, I feel like that's the case. I think the world, what it does is that it tries to teach in this idea that God is all love and you can't judge because God doesn't judge us. But I don't know where they get that concept from.
Because clearly God does.
They're clear, and if I would rather me judge you than God judge you for the sin of that you're doing. So and they always take this verse from Matthew 7 that says, "Do not judge your brother or sister," and all that stuff. But then it's kind of a hypocritical claim, because later on in that same chapter, Jesus Christ makes the judgment call by calling the Pharisees a hypocrite. So I don't think what Jesus Christ is saying there is that you can't judge at all.
I mean, Paul literally writes his epistles to address certain things that are wrong.
Everyone in the world makes judgment calls every single day. Yeah. You and I make judgment calls, like we're making judgment calls right now. What should I say right now? So everyone makes judgment calls. I think what Jesus Christ was aiming at was not making judgment calls in hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And I think the world, what they want, and also I do address this in the book of Colossians, but what they want is they want God, they want all of the good things of God, but they don't want the really the character of God, that he hates what is evil.
Yeah.
He has wrath toward his enemies. Like that's the God that we serve. He's a personal God, very similar to us. In fact, we're made in his image in that sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think what you're saying is really true. I think Christianity is beautiful because it has its boundaries. Satanism, what a crazy shift, but Satanism, what it ascribes to is freedom.
Yeah.
Many of them would say, yeah, we don't worship Satan. We just worship the idea that Satan, in his essence, is just a free creature. So we too are free, but it's a false freedom.
And I think sometimes there's some trolls in there. They know the consensus of what they believe in, so they purposely kind of jab at Christians.
For sure,
just to trigger some Christians.
I mean, the NBA Finals are happening right now. Yeah. I'm going for the Mavs, but they're not going to win it.
Man,
it looks
bro,
like they're not going to win it.
If they do come back from an 0-3 lead, bro.
They play tonight, so tonight maybe. But
I need Kyrie to go off. I need Luka to stop
40, man.
To stop literally choking.
Yeah, man, it sucks, man.
Because I
like Boston.
I love the Celtics, but I love the dynamic between them. Yes, bro, I want Luka to get it.
But anyway, we're watching the finals. The finals are happening right now. There is no basketball unless there is an out of bounds line. In the same sense, there is no Christianity unless there are boundaries that we adhere to, and those boundaries are what God likes. Does God like if I worship in this way? Does God like when I offer Him this? Does God like whenever I live my life that way? That really is the essence of Christianity, trying to do what God loves.
Yeah,
and He makes it so clear in the Word. Yeah, man.
I don't want to go off after that.
Yeah, go Mavs.
He said, "Go Mavs,
go Mavs, bro."
Yeah,
there's no way they're winning it, but
I really do want them to win. And it just has to do more with the fact that, like, yes, I love Luka, but like it's like Kyrie for me is just like
he's proven over and over again that he's like,
in the league, bro.
He's proven over and over again that he's one of my favorite players, man. Yeah. I used to not like him, especially whenever he went to the Celtics. And then went to Brooklyn and all these other things, but now in the Mavs he's like flourishing.
Yeah, like when I'll say this, I used to watch Kyrie when it was right before he made it to the league and before he got drafted. Nice, when he was playing in the McDonald's game. Yeah. And I seen him like, yo, this kid's a monster.
Yeah, he was.
I was young. I was like, yo, this dude is breaking everybody's ankles, man. Bro. It's a monster.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yo, he's gonna be something crazy in the league. And then lo and behold, he gets drafted to the Cavaliers, right?
The Bible is clear on predestination. Predestination is a thing. When we say, does God
define
control...
predestination for those that...
I mean, I feel like the only way you could really define it is by what it says in Romans 8, that those who God... I'm going to mess up the order, but it says like those who God called, He predestined, or those who God predestined, He also called, and those He called, He also... just along the line. Yeah, essentially, it's choosing beforehand.
Exactly. I can't forget what it's called. I have a book over there, right, that my brother actually did give me, and I forget what it's called. It's basically
elect.
It's the elect, right? Yeah. The elect, right? And it's basically God separating those that, because for example, like God offers salvation to everybody, right?
Yeah.
But not everybody will get saved. But at the same time, God knows who's going to be saved and who's not going to be saved.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like a checkbox thing. Like I have to think to myself, does God know everything? Yes. Does God know the future? Yes. If God is not fully in control, then that means that He's not fully sovereign. So God, yes, all of those are yeses. And then I also think about it because I don't want to say I've been leaning toward Calvinism, because I do think Calvinism has unfortunately been diluted to the 5 points of Calvinism, like the tulip. Yeah, I feel like Calvinism is much more than that. And probably even John Calvin wouldn't ascribe to everything that the tulip teaches. But
I subscribe to certain things. Like I agree with certain things, right? But not necessarily everything, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, when I was younger, I didn't. But nowadays, I feel like I do. I ascribe.
I mean, if you really look at tulip, right? For example, I think who was it that does a good explanation of it? Because I don't think he's a Calvinist either. But have you ever heard of a gentleman named Corey Miles?
Nope.
So there's a YouTube channel called the Smart Christians channel, right? Black guy, his name is Corey Miles. He did some time in prison, and
I do.
He's a good expositor of the.
He's Republican, isn't he?
I have no idea.
No, he was a cop.
I have no idea.
Maybe I was wrong.
Right?
Okay.
But he's a bald guy, glasses, right? And he does his live stream. Yeah, so I think you're.
No, I'm fully in
I
the
think you
wrong.
got 3 different people, put them into one, right?
Yeah.
But he does a good. I think his expository towards or his explanation towards Tulip, right? Because he's the type that when he live streams or whatever the case may be, he gives a he opens up the Bible, right? But he also has like the original language open right next to it, and he knows how to read
The Greek,
right? And so
Interlinear.
he's really like a brain, right? But he also goes into good explanation of that process or of Tulip, right? So the way that it is explained, you can see how it's kind of like Tulip kind of explains Christianity, really, if you really look at it, right?
I think all Christians are Calvinists in a sense, in the sense that like, because
I don't want to get into the whole 3-point, 4-point, 5-point Calvin because a lot of people call them.
That's the thing. I feel like the Tulip really doesn't do Calvinism justice. I do think all Christians obviously need to ascribe to predestination. All Christians do need to ascribe to God being totally sovereign. I will say this. When I think about the question, does God control? He obviously does control everything. But God is not the author of evil. But I do believe that God allows things to happen in his will. Crazy example, but you think of World War II and Adolf Hitler. I don't think God planted a seed of like, I think Hitler obviously did everything that he did out of his own sin nature, right. Out of his own volition. And I do think that God allows certain things to happen. You think of you could just read the Bible and this is the case. I'm reading through Jeremiah and it talks about how in the middle of Jeremiah, it kind of hints at the nation of Israel being sent to 70 years in captivity to Babylon. That is a bad thing. That's an evil thing. But it's something that God allowed to happen. So God wasn't the one who caused the evil to happen. He's the one who, using man's free will, allows certain things to happen so that he can ultimately get the glory.
Yeah, he will be glorified, even regardless. Like, I think, I'm going to read something to you that my brother said, and I thought it was really, really good as well. And like, for instance, actually, let me just read it to you real quick. Because this is my other brother. I have three brothers, right? I have Danny, Daniel, and Dennison, right? And then there's David. And then I have a sister named Dara. Dara, for the most part, she's very secluded into herself. But this is a conversation that we all had, and a lot of us worked and whatnot. I was responding to this while in a roof. Like I was like, I open up my phone, I get my response like that, right?
Yeah.
But let me see.
It's so sweet that your dad does that, though. That's so awesome.
No, so for sure, like when we're all together or whenever the case may be, my dad. This is one thing that my oldest brother Danny has said, and I can relate to it. Ever since I was a child, I always remember seeing my parents in their bed, either like laying down, reading a black book all the time. That's all I remember as a kid, right? And so, and I would always wonder why they did this, right? And I remember the verse, the saying of en paz me acostaré, así mismo dormiré, porque solo tú me haces vivir confiado, Salmo, like that right there. That's my mom used to repeat that to me at night when I was asleep, right? So, or when I was before we would go to sleep. Because he responds to Daniel, he said, "I believe that if we can adequately answer the question of the sovereignty of God, meaning is God sovereign, we can adequately respond to your question of does God control or establish, or both? Question." Right. So if God is sovereign, then as my brother Dennison said earlier, right, that when he in reference to the saying of if sometimes he feels like free will is a way of us understanding that we can't do it our own way. It has to be the way of God, right? So he goes, so in the response, sovereign, then as Dennison said, God is in control and has previously established his will, right? This does not mean God controls us like puppets and is in agreement with everything, but he does allow deviance, which is what you're referring to, deviance of Hitler, right? And still is in control for his will be done in the end, right? Yeah. So then I point out the clearest of deviance, right, is Lucifer. God will use, and obviously, you know, that comes to another question of like the creation, like, or what is evil, right? Yeah. And it's not really a creation. It's just anything outside of God is inherently evil, right? And so for me, it's just like, even what Lucifer has done throughout the Bible, God still uses Lucifer to glorify himself, regardless of it. Even when he's tempting Jesus, Jesus is glorified, right? Yeah. And even at the end of all this, right, God will still use Lucifer to glorify himself. Everything.
Yes. The Bible compares the Satan, the adversary, to like a dog on a leash. Mm-hmm. He can only go as far as God allows him to go. So honestly, the more that I think about it, it's obviously both. He controls and he establishes. Romans talks about how... Romans 13, we were talking about it, how all authority is appointed by God. You think about nowadays, President Joe Biden, whether you like him or not, he was someone that was appointed by God.
Mm-hmm.
King Nebuchadnezzar, I was reading Jeremiah, and God calls him in his speech, he says, my servant Nebuchadnezzar.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's servant in the same sense that like John was a disciple
Yeah.
to Jesus, but servant in the sense that he will eventually serve God's will.
Mm-hmm.
So God obviously has to establish everything. If he didn't, then he wouldn't be all sovereign.
Yeah.
And God obviously has to control everything. And if he didn't, then he wouldn't be all sovereign.
Yeah, there's certain things that happen that even occur in our lives that confront us and make us turn to God.
Dude,
right?
it's I mean, your car crash, like something like that, something that obviously isn't a good thing, but God uses it for his glory.
I remember I walked out of there, bro, and the police and everybody was out there. There was the lady that was in front of me or behind me when that happened. She was out there, and they were all scrambling in the car
Wow.
to pull out somebody, right?
But you were out.
And I was outside standing looking at all of them like,
Crazy.
this is my car. They're like, yeah, but who was driving? I'm like, it was me that was
I'm
driving
okay.
it. And then the officers then came up to me, running to me to check to see if I had any injuries. And this, I didn't know I had this until
You didn't feel it?
afterwards. No,
The adrenaline was pumping?
it was pumping so much that it's not even like, you can't really even like,
Yeah.
it's just like some scar tissue.
Wow,
right?
man, that's crazy.
And I remember afterwards when the ambulance left and everything like that, I remember my hand felt wet. That's afterwards when I realized, oh, I got cut. Right.
Yeah.
And that's
Wow.
when it still didn't hurt. None of it still hurt. And I remember even after that, the day after that, we had a worship conference to go to, and I had to play the piano. So I went and I played with the piano with like this bandage all over it, right?
Wow.
The next day after the service, my hand swelled up because it was like, you did too much, bro.
That's nuts. But yeah, I think that's a great example of it.
Yeah.
God controls everything. He establishes everything. He causes things to happen by his own decree. I do think that if we don't, this is going to sound harsh, but I do think that if the answer isn't both to us, then we are diminishing God's sovereignty. I know that sounds crazy, but I hope none of your brothers said either or.
No.
Okay.
We all agree. We all agree to the fact that it was both.
Yeah.
That God does both.
Because
We can't limit God to doing either or, right? It's like, for example, like when we say that God is omniscient, right, or omnipresent, and so on and so forth, and He knows the beginning, the end, and the present, right? God doesn't switch from one mentality to another. He's not just knowing and understanding the present, but He also understands the future.
Yes.
Right? He's not switching either of those. He knows everything, right? And for us, that's where my beginning of trying to understand God came from. And I got to a point in my life where I was like, I'm trying so hard to understand God and not grow relationship with God.
Yeah.
Right. Which is two different things. Right. And there's some godly aspects that I've tried hard in my life to understand. I realized that those are certain things that I have to just leave it as is.
Yeah.
Because I'm a human. I can't understand how God works. Right. I can't understand. I know God works outside of time. And so sometimes for me, time is like a big thing. Like, bro, I look into so many things. Like I said, I'm a Google search browser and I got 16 tabs open.
For sure.
Right. But with that, I can appreciate that I've grown my relationship with Christ and I've seen God's hand in my life. Right. And those around me. Right. And I think that us having our encounter even after high school was something that I think God had planned and in place, right?
I think so.
Because if it wasn't for those things, right, I wouldn't have. For example, when I went to your church, right, I went there and and by the way, lovely church, right?
Yeah.
I love you guys' church. When we went out there and we were exposed to this, we were like, wow, man, you can really learn. Not just because, like I said, I spent 7 years in a super heavy Pentecostal church, right?
Yeah.
And there's still people that I speak to from there, and
sure.
I still have friends from there and stuff. And it's just unfortunate that certain things get drowned out by extremism, right? And
for sure.
And
that's one of the drawbacks to Pentecostalism.
Yeah.
It's only 100 years old, and it's beautiful in the sense that it's very zealous, but not unanimous, but the general consensus is that Pentecostalism is a fairly disorganized denomination.
Yeah, and
it allows for a lot of things that extremism, like you're saying.
And for example, there is, sorry guys, I didn't mean for that. I think it's gone off like a couple times during the podcast, and I try to catch it right before it does.
Yeah.
But for example, like this is kind of more or less the reason why, because you were speaking about it earlier as to like why leaving your church, right? For example, right? So we can speak to this on our personal experience, Didi and I, right? The main thing, right? Once we started realizing in our church, or in a denomination, right? Specifically, denominations have preset rules, right? That's why I appreciate non-denominational churches, because we can. It's constantly, at least in the church that I exist in, right? There's constantly a learning process, right? my pastor, if he's wrong, and he'll acknowledge that he's wrong, if anything, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because we're all humans and we're all learning and we're all still growing in the walk, right? But the denominations have preset rules that in order to be a leader or some sort of acting role, you need to abide by these preset rules, right? And you cannot teach outside of these rules, right?
Even it's a conviction.
Yeah, even if these rules sometimes aren't biblically correct, these are the rules that we abide by, right? Because that's how they were taught. Sometimes a lot of the things that you learn growing up in certain denominations is kind of like a ritual thing, right? There's certain things, there's certain dogmas that are kind of integrated into certain churches and so on and so forth. And that's kind of what led us to understanding that no matter how we try to have these conversations with whoever it is, right, in the church, because we've had people ask us these certain questions, and it's almost like they put a wall up immediately because they have to abide by these certain particular rules. And we're not being defiant or anything like that. We're just trying to understand. We're trying to legitimately grow a relationship with God. I'm trying to answer. Like when I first had certain conversations with you, I was like, yo, why do you guys do this? Or why do you guys do that? Right. And it's not to challenge you, right? It's for me to understand, right?
For sure.
And once we started hearing the answers, it wasn't that the answers were not enough for us. It's that the answers that were given, we'd refer back to scripture and be like, wait, this doesn't coincide with what we're. So and mind you, by the way, I made my decision 3 years prior to us. I still stayed for 3 years serving the church, right? Because I still felt like I had a duty to represent Christ in my life to the church. And so
interesting, man.
And so that's kind of what made us make our move.
Really, for me it wasn't. For me it was because whenever I did leave my other church, it wasn't because of any like particular doctrinal thing.
Really quick.
Yeah.
Guys, just because there's not agreeances or grievances that you have with your church doesn't make that the excuse to just leave your church.
Oh, for sure.
No church is perfect, period.
Yeah.
So don't make that be the motivation as to why you leave or anything like that. That has to do. That has to do with a lot of personal experiences that happen within the church that cause certain people to move from one church to another. But
so when I left my other church, it wasn't because of any doctrinal issue. It was just something that I felt internally that I had talked to it with my youth pastor at the time. I had felt in me that I wanted to just venture into something. I knew I wanted when I was 20 that I wanted to do like ministry. It was something that I really wanted to venture into, get more experience. And then so I asked for the blessing of my pastors, and they all gave me that.
That's how I got into my Pentecostal church, by the way. I was in another church and I asked for that blessing, and that's how
Yeah. And so I got the blessing, and then I started looking for stuff, and then I found, long story short, I found the church that I'm at now. They had a program for literally ministry development. I went over there, and then after 9-10 months there, they offered me a position to be on staff at the church. And then I decided to stay there. I had conversations with my pastors back at home, and I kind of told them the whole thing. And even still, it was their blessing. So for me, it wasn't any doctrinal issues. It was just more so, it just felt like a natural progression.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm at right now.
And that happens. Sometimes you're there for a season, and there's another season where you have to, you continue to grow. And sometimes there's other avenues that allow you to grow in that aspect.
The thing about denominations that I find so interesting, and again, I've been studying it recently, so I don't know everything, but I do know enough where if I were to have a conversation with 19, 20-year-old me about denominations, that 19, 20-year-old me would be flat out wrong. Because I've been
19-year-old me would not listen at all. I'm 26, so I'm turning 27 next month. So.
Oh, nice, man. But I've learned recently about denominations is that, and again, this is the divide between non-denominational churches and denominational churches, is that non-denominational churches, they don't exactly have an emphasis on church history and tradition.
Yeah.
Many people say that Catholics are so big on tradition, all they care about is tradition. That actually isn't the case. All denominations care about tradition in some sense or the other. And what I've learned recently about non-denominational churches is they have a hyper focus on the scriptures, which is a very, very good thing. And they have a hyper focus on personal conviction, which is, again, a very, very good thing. But they don't necessarily have a really good attention to tradition and what the church fathers have said for time and time again all throughout church history. Whereas denominational churches, let's think of Presbyterians, let's think of Reformed, let's think of Catholics, let's think of Eastern Orthodox. Tradition to them is like the biggest thing. Even Eastern Orthodox and Catholics put tradition above scripture.
Yeah.
Which that's a whole conversation for another day, but I don't think it's inherently wrong to honor tradition. Obviously, there's some extremism to it, but I don't think it's bad to honor tradition. And so whenever you come to like churches,
if you have a church and they have certain rules that you need to abide by, I would agree, to abide by those rules, right?
Yes,
if they're not conflicting with the Word of God or being heresy to anything, then you should probably abide by those rules.
I do think one of the reasons why there are so many denominations is because whenever it comes to certain liturgical practices like church services and how we do everything, Scripture is actually, I think it's on purpose, but Scripture is actually vague. Nowhere in the Bible do you see, in the New Testament specifically, a church service to start like this, then it should go to this point, then it should go to that point. You don't see that. Where do we get our traditional church services from? We get it from early church history, tradition. And so I think one of the reasons why there are so many divides within denominations is because there are so many different practices and different methods into how we do church.
Yeah.
But I think the reason as to why Scripture is so vague is mainly because what Scripture cares about is the heart behind what you do, more so than why you do what you do or what you do.
Yeah.
For example, Scripture cares more about if you have a proper heart posture in hearing the word, in worshiping God, rather than what is your method in worshiping God. I don't know if that makes sense. Obviously, Scripture does have methods, but it more so cares about the heart. Someone described it this way that I thought was brilliant. Christianity is like a giant glass. For example, we have a giant glass pane right here. It's just one whole glass pane. Each denomination is a crack in the pane. It's still the same piece of glass, but it's just, there are now different sections to it because different cracks have begun to form. But the thing with non-denominationalism is that again, it's still Christian. All denominations are Christian. They all love Jesus Christ. But non-denominationalism is like little tiny cracks all throughout the little, and each church, because it's all non-denominational, each church is its own little tiny subset in the glass pane. It's all still Christian. They all still love Jesus Christ so much, but it just has its own subdivisions. Not every non-denominational church is the same, because not every it's in the name. They don't adhere to a denomination. I think that's why I respect denominations so much, because denominations at the end of the day are massive organizations of churches, which I appreciate because they have a consistency in their views.
Yeah, sometimes, but sometimes no. The larger the denomination, sometimes that denomination comes from becoming a church, a people of church, to a business, right? And once you have a certain influx of flow of finances, it's like, how do we keep this thing afloat? So that's why they start with these conferences and so on and so forth. That's a whole nother conversation. I don't want to get into that. But yeah, I agree.
Man. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So while I may not agree with every denomination in terms of their practice and why they do the things that they do, I can at least respect them because they do honor their tradition. And at the end of the day, whenever we get to heaven, whenever we're with the Lord in eternity, whenever we're in the new heaven and the new earth, I'm going to look at a Presbyterian and I'm going to be like, oh, you're a Presbyterian. I'm not going to say,
brother in Christ.
I would say you're my brother in Christ. I'm not going to say, oh, you're a Presbyterian or oh, you were Catholic. Can't believe you were Eastern Orthodox. Because if you and I were to go to an Eastern Orthodox
your logo
church,
looks better than mine. I don't.
Exactly. If you and I were to go to an Eastern Orthodox church, say, I don't know, anywhere out there in the world, we would be so shocked because Eastern Orthodox churches are kind of stuck in the 8th century. They do the exact same things that they did back then. They have their different icons of the different church fathers and the different apostles. And we look at them, how they worship, the way that they do things. We look at them and we're like, this is weird. This is so just out of nowhere. It just makes no sense to us. But to them, that's how they worship Jesus Christ.
I'll say this
it's
much.
the tradition.
I'll say this much. In my father, right? He works for the Salvation Army, and
sweet.
They have their churches, right? So when we would go to their churches, we would sit down, right? And the Salvation Army gives a lot of their leaders certain areas to establish their church in and grow their community in there, right? And so my dad did that a couple times in Tennessee throughout different locations, right? But whenever we would visit like the mother office or whatever the case may be, or the home office, I would call it, we would go inside the pews, right? Sit down, and they always had these books that you would open up, and through there, this is the hymns. We have to sing these hymns, and we can't veer off of this.
No spontaneous worship here.
And I remember it was like, we don't veer off of this, and they had their specific musicians that they would give classes to. I remember being in the classroom learning a trumpet, and I don't know how to play it well.
Man.
I nothing of trumpets, bro.
Dude.
This is like when I was a kid, by the way. Right?
That's so interesting.
And so I remember just sitting there, and I just hear these hymns, and I'm like, wow, this is almost cultish.
Dude, and it's crazy. The thing though is like,
it's just they have a specific way of doing things, and that's what they like.
It's so different from us because our churches have a hyper focus on contemporary worship.
Yeah.
You listen to our churches sing Elevation. They sing Maverick City. They sing their Hill songs. They sing their.
I do believe though that I'm not saying your church does this, but I'm saying in the sense of like, I do believe that there's certain worship songs that I'm just like, if you hear the words, some things sound a little like, probably shouldn't sing that one because
some worship songs are trash.
Yeah, there you go. I was trying to be nice about it.
Some worship songs are
like I don't want to say any. I'll bleep it
with out. Something like this.
I'll bleep it out. Like Reckless Love. Right, to me, it's like God does not have reckless love at all.
Interesting.
Right? I bleeped it out. Yeah. I maybe included it. Who cares?
No, I mean I don't know. But I don't like that song. But the reason why I don't like that song is not because of the reckless love thing. I don't like it because I don't like the
I don't believe God's love is reckless.
Not even the theology behind it. I just don't like the progression of the song. I'm a musician, so it goes down. It starts like in a minor key, and
for example, like me, the song that I'm like, I don't like this song, not because I don't like this song, but for me, it's Waymaker.
Really?
Right? Because this is why I played it all the time.
And that song doesn't change chords.
It does not change.
It just repeats the whole thing over and over.
And as a pianist who's playing chords, I'm like, give me a little freedom to do something else, right? So
Waymaker does not change, dude.
That was my previous youth pastor, which we still talk to this day.
Over and over again. It's a powerful song. He
played that song. He loves that song. That's like his song, right? So we would play it every week. It was included in worship. That was one song that was included in worship. So, and if it was a spontaneous, like, hey, I'm going to start preaching and I need a song, I know it's Waymaker. I know it's Waymaker.
Don't worry, man. I know it.
And then then he'll hear it, give me a look and be like, yeah, like that was the one. I'm just like, man. I give him a look like, yeah, but inside I'm just like,
like, please let me do something else. But that's the thing. Like, I was watching a Baptist church service online not too long ago just to see how it does it, and it's very similar to that. They do the hymns. The service starts with, all right, grab your hymn books. We're gonna read hymn 32, and then we're gonna read hymn 39 in worship, and then after that, the orchestra band is gonna lead us in worship.
Yeah,
and it's just
that's like very very Reformed Baptist church that do that. By the way,
I love it
because there's other Baptist church that they'll go. You know, they have their set of songs, but it's similar to like for example, like how your church does it, right? There's some Baptist churches that literally worship the same way. So.
Yeah, and that's why I say non-denominational churches are just Baptist without the title. It's not for me. I can't coin that phrase. It's a very popular idea that's being said.
I think it might be Mike Winger that says that.
Maybe he does.
I think it's Mike Winger. Yeah.
I didn't hear it from him. I heard it from like another YouTuber who said it, and once he said, I was like, that just makes so much sense.
Yeah, but
and then I realized, it's something that. Yeah. A lot of people like ascribe to, but I do, like in terms of worship, I love hymns, dude.
Yeah.
All I've grown up is in contemporary worship, and just the popular Bethel songs, all that stuff, which I do love. But recently, I've started, because I've been studying church history. I've been learning a lot more about hymns. I'm loving hymns. Really? My favorite hymn is I have a handful. The top 4 or 3 are "What a Friend We Have in Jesus." How Great Thou Art.
I hear How Great Thou Art all the time.
I love it, man. Yeah. And then a hymn that I found not too long ago called When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. That one, it's just four verses.
If you look at their hymns though, they're very profound. Man. They're very profound and very, very, very in-depth.
I think that's why, for me, I've sort of grown a little bit of a disdain toward contemporary worship music, because contemporary worship music, while I do think many of it is very theological,
you and it's emotional. And
it's intended to be emotional. Whereas you look at old hymns, what the focus of it,
in the book
it draws
of Psalms,
your emotion
you
out
see
of it.
hundreds of hymns that are very, 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 like David when he pours his heart out.
Yeah,
it's just like he's really going in.
Yeah, and his hymns and his psalms are a mixture of theology and emotion. I do think some contemporary worship music really does focus on emotion and loving God, which I think is a beautiful thing. But I think what fuels our love for God is the theology behind our worship songs. So and also it's probably just me as a Christian, because I love church history, I love theology. Yeah. So I'm naturally more drawn to those hymns. I'm naturally more drawn to those hymns that were written like the 1500s, and they're just old English, but they have such rich and powerful
It's so cool to just figure, like, even though these things are written in history, right? It's just cool to see how things have progressed, right?
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
What is it really that you believe in, right? And how did it come about?
So on and so forth. I don't understand when Christians say we can't be influenced by the culture when we are. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me when people
even
say
the Bible, I think a lot of the like Mosaic law was based on certain cultures, like the cultures within there. So
every single book in the Bible is always in the context of the culture of the land at that time. Every single one. Yeah. So obviously we submit to the culture. We don't live in its sinful nature, but we all submit to the culture. The reason why we have contemporary music nowadays is because freaking pop songs and like all these things blew up. So okay, let's make Christian music.
My dad loves "I Am a Friend of God."
Oh man, that's a bop.
He said that's a bop.
It's so good, man.
Yeah, my dad loves that song, and that's one of those songs where like I love it, but like don't like playing it.
Yeah,
because it's the same thing.
I never played it.
It's the same thing, bro.
It's too old. It's too old for my time because I only started playing instruments like 4 years ago.
Oh man, it's like I remember playing it, and like the piano was not thrusted upon me, but I remember I saw a friend play the piano, and I was like, yo, I want to learn what he's playing, and then I kind of figured it out. And my dad saw that, and immediately, my dad's like passionate, like I am to certain things. Where he discovers something, he goes in. So he's like, my son, I'm gonna make sure that you evolve in this right here, and he like unravels it, which I do thank my father for that, because even to this day, I can just pick up a piano and play certain things, right?
Yeah, man. That's sweet.
So, but yeah. Anyways, all right, you guys, D&D podcast. I want to thank Nadiel for coming in here and blessing us with your time and sharing it with us.
Thank you for having me.
I would hope that you would like to come back again at some point, any point in the future. But yeah, guys, if you guys can, give Nadiel a follow. I'm gonna leave all his socials in the description. Make sure you go download his book, the guidebook to the book of Colossians. Like I said, very informative. I think you can receive a lot of things and learn a lot of things from it. It'll help you understand basically how Colossians is written, what it was meant for, the purpose of it, and so on and so forth, and why Paul wrote this to the people of Colossae. So, Nadiel, any last words?
No, thank you guys for listening. That was awesome.
Awesome, guys. We'll see you guys next time. God bless you guys. Maybe next time will be after we give birth.
Wow, with a child.
Yes,
that's
the child, but not with the baby. And I'm not doing that.
Love
you guys. Yeah. Love you guys. Peace, y'all.
See you.